Hello, everyone. This is Gary Gomes. I'm talking to you from New Bedford, Massachusetts. This show is based around, or this presentation is based around jyotish, how it affects you personally, how it affects the world, or essentially how we can assess upcoming events around the world. I was actually started taping yesterday, recording yesterday, but I kept getting interrupted or knocked off. And I kind of chalked that up to the eclipse that occurred yesterday. So this was probably a good move for me in that I managed to get um, a little bit more clearance and a little bit more clarity on my thoughts. You can hear you may be able to hear it. Here I have a stuffy nose. I think it's just a seasonal allergy, so so I don't think it's anything really to be that crazy worried about. Um, so essentially, we are going to be having some interviews coming up on the show. If you want to contact me for readings, please do so, or for lessons, please do so at 508-525-0001. I can also point you towards other astrologers if you don't like my particular style. I'm not really jealous about that. I've been an astrologer for a long time, and I know a lot of people in the field, and so essentially, obviously, I'd like you to choose me first, but I realize that not everyone has uh, the same tastes or the same interests as I do. So, yeah, I'll direct you to people who can help you. Okay. So let's see now. So I'm going to pull up a map. So obviously, a lot of our attention is focused on Israel right now. This is this is a big event because Israel's at the center of a lot of activity. Um, by the way, next week I'm hoping to have the new computer set up and all the software downloaded so you'll get a better presentation of this. So the new computer is actually set up. I just have to get the software downloaded for the astrology and for Zoom. So that's basically and the email. That's basically what I have to do. So yeah, so we're pretty close. Finally, after all these months. But so yeah, improved broadcast quality hopefully next week. So let's see now. Let's go to the map of Israel. I am expecting to have some more guests on. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. I am expecting to have some more guests on in the next few months. It's just been a matter of scheduling on my part, not the guest part. And so we'll see what we can do to make this gathering a little bit more uh, non one dimensional. So all right. So I put the chart on the screen. It's not showing up yet. So let's stop the share. Try it a second time. And sometimes YouTube does this, and it looks like it's shown up, but I'm going to do it 3 times for luck, which I normally do. There's a rule of 3 in some Vedic teachings. I don't think this is quite what they had in mind, but this is the chart of Israel. Now, one of the things you can see from this chart is Um, the one thing I'd like to draw your attention to really, really carefully is the the rising sign is Virgo. The attack occurred, the Hamas attack occurred last week when, excuse me, when Mercury was in Virgo, and Mercury still is in Virgo. So we're hearing a lot of communications about this. I've noticed that really big events, it doesn't always happen this way, but really big events happen when Mercury is in Virgo and the nodes are involved with malefics. So the lunar nodes in particular. So that's Rahu and Ketu are involved with malefics. Now, one of the things, so this is like a short, quote unquote, really, really simplified reading of Israel's chart. But Israel is a Virgo rising country based upon the birth date I have of May 14th, 1948. Um, it's got K2 in the second house. It's got Mars in the 12th house. That means excuse me, had an itch and I had to scratch it. Um, Mars is in the 12th house. K2 is in the second house. So essentially, this house represents the nature of the country. And it's basically lucky, you know, it'll almost always spring back, okay, because the Lord of the first house is in the ninth, and the Lord of the ninth house is in the 10th. So that gives numerous opportunities for rebirth based upon this time. But it was born during a difficult period. It was born during a 7.5 year period of Saturn, which is sort of like a stereotypical placement in Vedic astrology, which you see right here. Moon and Saturn are in the same place. So that makes it stubborn. That makes it a well-known country. That's one of the things it does for it. But this Mars Ketu tends to keep it in a warlike state. Now, one of the interesting things about this particular chart is um, we have Rahu over here in the eighth house. Rahu's the planet which is connected essentially um, with reform, but also revolution, also disruption. And for the past several months, Rahu's been with Jupiter in this particular house. I can show you from the transit map, which we're going to go to in a second. So Rahu's with Jupiter over here. So that's been the judicial reform that Prime Minister Netanyahu has been instituting. And I think, so let's go back to the main chart. And you'll also notice that Mars is with K2. Okay. So K2's, so there's an expression in Indian astrology that Rahu is like Saturn, K2 is like Mars. Okay. So you have K2 in the second house. So you have really the first house in the Israeli chart surrounded by warlike planets. And I think one of the other things that's happening is Saturn in retrograde is aspecting Mars. So that'll give a call back. So this particular, I'm going to adjust my outlook on this in terms of how long this will last. One of the reasons it was unnoticed or it was ignored or blown off, depending on who you listen to, um, the attack was, wasn't noticed, is because Rahu is in a house of secrets. Okay, so Rahu's in the eighth house. Its Lord is in the 12th house. So there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff going on, a lot of um, subterfuge. And Rahu can be tough to pin down. We've heard stories that Hamas has like tunnels leading to different countries and different areas. So this could become a multi-country war, um, just because the um, of the involvement, the indirect involvement of other countries, and in some cases the direct involvement of other countries. Um, and so that's the danger. Rahu is sometimes used by Indian astrologers as a shortcut for uh, identifying Muslims, and so I don't know if I necessarily ascribe to that, but it's essentially uh, it's a view of Indian astrology as unorthodox behavior, um, and so Israel has this kind of perpetual cycle of struggle because Saturn's aspecting its first house. But the most important thing, I think, to keep in mind is that Israel entered this Rahu major planetary period back in February. Okay, so since February of this year, there have been demonstrations in Israel. There have been um, large rebellions against the government. Or not rebellion. Yeah, yeah. I'll say it. Well, rebellions is too strong a word, but yeah, but essentially massive demonstrations. And also, this was probably being planned um, for a while. Okay, at least from early February. And I think that's one of the takeaways. Eighth house planets tend to uh, conspire in secret. So I think, and also Rahu tends to be horrifying. So we're hearing a lot of stories uh, about beheadings and things like that, and that's K2's territory. And the Mars K2 conjunction in this sign essentially just ruined the peace. Um, it's so I'm not going to say right now, um, at least in this particular conflict, you know, obviously I don't want to see anybody get hurt. I don't want to see anybody um, invaded in that particular fashion. There's no but here. That's really despicable behavior. Okay, so it's so essentially we're going to see how, but I'm not going to get involved in the debate about um, I'm not going to fuss around and say who's who is to blame, who is not to blame. It's really it's it's really uh, been horrifying to watch, and it's really disgusting and despicable to watch. Okay, to be honest. Um, so it's um, I think if I'm looking at it projection earliest end, possibly, and again, this is not going to sound very different from last week. Earliest end I'm seeing is maybe December, but I think because of this Rahu major planetary period, this could go on for years. I mean, literally years. So this could go on really until 2025 or have ramifications until 2025 and involve a lot of other countries, unfortunately. So I'm hoping I'm wrong about that. But the earliest signs I think you'll see of any peace developing will be around December. And By the way, don't take my hesitation about the condemnation of the attack in any way as being that I'm uh, anti-Israeli or anti-Palestinian. It's just that I think, you know, I can remember getting lectured by a couple of consultants. I was in a group after the 9/11 attacks, and they were justifying the 9/11 attacks based upon what had happened to certain countries in the Middle East and Africa. And I just said to myself, this is really incredibly stupid to lecture. You know, it's like somebody gets viciously attacked in the street, and you look at them and say, well, you shouldn't have been carrying around all that money. They were viciously attacked in the street. There's no defense for that, right? Okay, so it's really, I don't know. I just find this entire I find a lot of the political posing really, really um, embarrassing. Um, and Israel obviously has a right to defend itself. You know, that's not a question. All right, so let's go on to the current map of the world. And if you disagree with me, that's fine, but disagree with me, um, don't assume you know my politics because you don't. The map of the world is pretty, um, again, it's in a pretty difficult place right now. We're right after a solar eclipse, excuse me. And the solar eclipse, essentially, solar eclipses tend to shame governments to a certain extent. So that's why you're seeing a lot of, um, you've been seeing actually a buildup towards this from basically from about the past 6 months or so, because a lot of the scandals, especially around governments, a lot of the increased control we're seeing coming from governments is because of Saturn aspecting Jupiter and also from the sun being so close to Ketu. So this was within the past 3 or 4 weeks. And I've noticed, at least in media, um, there's been sort of a little bit of a backlash, a little bit of uh, a reeling in of of defending governmental actions. And that's in part because I think because of the Saturn retrograde and also because of Saturn's aspect on Venus, because if Saturn's aspect on Venus, it'll be less forgiving, it'll be less tolerant. Venus is really one of the most tolerant planets. Sun and Mercury together, there are a lot of communications coming of um, out of governments right now, obviously. But again, a lot of the desire to control media, especially, and I said this years ago in an interview with Gary O'Toole. Um, a lot of the media outlets are having increased control by governments put on them. Now, that depending on your perspective, that may be a good thing, that may be a bad thing. From my perspective, it's not really healthy. Um, and so you do need some kind of exchange of information and some kind of free form. And that also includes the right of the side that opposes you to tell you you're wrong, or the right other side that's opposed, that's being opposed, to also be told they're wrong. Okay, so it's a it, it's a two-way street. So so if you have some freedom, if you have freedom to criticize, you also have freedom to be criticized yourself. Okay, so I think one of the things that I noticed is both sides are accusing other sides of brainwashing, and that's the Saturn Jupiter aspect. It's essentially what I would call a limited perspective on the truth. So people are trying to control. So Jupiter's really the planet. Jupiter and Venus are the two planets connected with the truth in general, and both planets are afflicted by Saturn right now. So I think one of the things is that we're expecting the truth to come out of either side right now. We're going to be waiting for a few months, and earliest probably November, December, and especially not over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. And I would even say over the next month and a half. Okay. Just because Venus is going to be afflicted for another month and a half or so. In terms of um, there's a lot of concern about economic stability right now. Saturn's aspecting Jupiter. It's Rahu's right at the end of the sign. It'll cause some kind of panic. And Rahu entering Pisces will cause some kind of water disasters or water concerns. K2 entering Virgo, from what I've seen, will increase to a certain extent, will increase um, insecurity. It will increase, it will cause an increase in fear of terrorism. Okay, because, and the main reason I'm saying that is not only because of what's happened in Israel um, and Hamas, and not only because of what's happening in the Ukraine. Essentially, a lot of countries are suffering um, financially right now. Not every country, okay? So let's be clear about that. Not every country is, but a lot of countries are facing um, unexpected crises in terms of crops and population growth uh, and again, the United States isn't the only country facing immigration issues. Europe is too. I think certain parts of uh, Africa are, it's really, people are moving because they think they can be happier somewhere else. And let's say if you're moving from let's say Syria to Germany, there's no question you're going to be happier in Germany than you are in Syria, just because Syria has been decimated. It's really, it's been attacked, and it's been in a state of war, and so again, these are events that cause people to leave their homeland. Okay, this is not so. This isn't a mystery. Okay, no, it isn't that all of a sudden these groups just said, well, we're going to inundate Europe because we want to ruin Europe. That's not the idea. That's never the idea. And the same is true, obviously, of the United States. But I think one of the problems we run into with the United States in particular is we have basically Saturn is clouding um, our fifth house in the United States. And what that means is essentially we're kind of blind to what to essentially what's going on. We really don't know what's going on. Okay. Um, and again, that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be. That doesn't mean there should be a universal ban, but we really don't. The first point in understanding is recognizing you don't know what's going on. And I think that's something that's slowly dawning on people, especially as Rahu starts to slink into Pisces. Um, I think one of the problems you run into is there's a certain intransigence, sorry, as Saturn aspects Jupiter, so that'll make people kind of stick to their positions. I don't think you're going to see a real change in policy really until the end of November or even uh, early January because of the retrogrades. And again, there'll be increased anger and increased tendency towards violence and accidents. Also, just in general, be really careful driving over the next week, 2 weeks or so. Okay. So I think we can expect more of the same, more economic uncertainty, um, and also more attempts at what I would call increased governmental control. We're seeing that in certain countries around the world, which I won't name because I don't want to get blocked. Um, and I think the other thing is with this June Jupiter Moon combination over here, there's going to be a lot of argument over the next few weeks at least, and a lot of fighting over the next few weeks at least. Do I think this will turn into a major war? No, and I've said this repeatedly over and over again in several past broadcasts. The larger planetary cycles are not don't feed that. But Israel itself is in a period not unlike the United States is in right now, and it just started it. So you will see more uh, domestic unrest in Israel over the next few years than normal. Uh, and you're going to see that in the United States as well, and you're going to see these large ideological battles will continue. But I think one thing that I have seen uh, coming is that um, with Rahu moving away from Jupiter, there'll be less attention on dogmatism and more attention on pragmatism. And what I mean by that is you won't see ideological viewpoints driving the dialogue quite so strongly as you did before. Um, Now, that doesn't mean we're going to live in an ideology free zone. That's impossible. But you'll see less um, reaction, less emotional reaction to uh, pushback on certain areas of life. Okay. And I also think you'll see more. I'm hopeful you'll see a little bit more calming down uh, of temperaments over the next few months, mainly because of it won't happen until December or so, but just because of the Mars aspect on Jupiter. But Rahu leaving Jupiter pretty soon is a really good sign because at least even though it's good to know about things that are happening. I think one of the things that I've noticed is that a lot of messaging tends to be fanatical. Uh, and I'm using that word intentionally. It's essentially, unless you agree with my position 100%, I will not talk with you. And that adherence to that kind of um, posturing, I think, is going to diminish dramatically in November and December. All right, so let's go on to the individual signs. If we're looking at the individual signs, we have Aries up here. And it still has that Jupiter-Rahu conjunction, but there'll be a feeling of less frustration, less limitation, less um, hopelessness for this particular sign over the next few months. Relationship life will be a little bit difficult, though, and you'll find a lot of your attention focused on home matters and satisfying relationship partners. But also a lot of anger directed at relationship partners. Now, the interesting thing of this is there is some potential for love affairs or romantic involvements for this particular sign. And with Mars in Venus's sign in Libra, you're going to see a lot of attention um, on romantic involvements, maybe even some temptation towards cheating. Okay, so you're going to have to be careful about that. It depends really on how much of a risk taker you are. You know, I wouldn't suggest it just because Rahu and Jupiter combined make stupid judgments. And especially aspected by Saturn, you're not going to make a good judgment. Sun is in the sixth house, the Lord of the fifth is in the sixth. So any romantic involvements, the partners will turn into enemies. And they'll be sharp, they'll be slick about it. But there is a strong temptation to, get together with other people. Saturn's aspect in the eighth house. So again, we're not looking a lot behind the scenes. Career-wise, this sign looks okay. It looks like there's a lot of disruption in career life, but some slow but steady gains. So again, it's a choice for Aries between excitement and risk and staying in a contentious relationship for a short time until it improves radically in around December. For Taurus, this is May 15th to June 15th. Taurus has a heavy expenditure pattern, mainly because of its desires and because it's going to want to buy things it really doesn't need. Saturn's in the 10th house. That's a good planet for Taurus. I think you'll see a lot of this sign do really well career-wise. A lot of people with this sign doing really well career-wise. Venus is in the 4th house. A lot of emotional intensity to this sign this month, and a lot of creative energies to this sign over the next few days and weeks. 6th house, there'll be some problems with parents or with relationship partners. There'll be some arguments with those individuals. And it'll usually be about money, at least from what I can tell from this chart. So essentially, a lot of the chart is going to be money-driven arguments for a lot of signs. But that Moon-Mars K2 conjunction, it's really kind of like a tinderbox combination, even though K2 and Mars aren't really close together. It can really set up fireworks pretty easily. So just be careful. Every sign should be careful of this. So work-wise, career-wise, so you look fine. Okay. Gemini, June 15th to July 15th. Venus is in the 3rd house. It's a good placement. It will make the sign very courteous, very conscious of its own needs. It'll be turned off or disenchanted with romantic involvements. 7th house Lord is with Jupiter and Rahu. So it's essentially probably coming out of some kind of an obsessive relationship or obsessive interest. It doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship, excuse me. It doesn't necessarily have to be a relationship, but it can be some kind of obsessive desire the individual has. But typically in charts like this, usually if Jupiter's with Rahu in the seventh house, it involves long-term relationships. So it's sort of like a clearing of the clouds. Not quite there, but it's on the way. And but it still does bring a great deal of sadness because Saturn's aspect on the ninth house, or the 11th house, excuse me. So some gains the person will throw themselves into career, especially over the next 2 weeks, and you'll start to see sort of like a light in terms of financial gains, increased financial gains coming, but slowly. For Cancer, Cancer has Venus in the second house. This is usually a good, this is July 15th to August 15th. Cancer has Venus in the second house, so it's good for career life for this planet. It's good for financial gains. It's good for status of this planet. Third house has Sun and Mercury, so it will communicate extremely well. Let's see now. Sun and Mercury lead to the third house, so there's a certain element, I'm sorry, at least to the fourth house. So there is some disruption with family members, some disruption in home life. And fifth house Lord is Mars. So I guess some arguments with children, some arguments with people you're engaged in creative matters with. Saturn's in the is Lord of the seventh house, located in the eighth house. That usually indicates relationship partners will be working very, very hard or very, very earnestly. Jupiter's in the ninth house. That's actually I'm sorry, it's in the 10th house. My apologies. It's in the 10th house, the one with Rahu. So that will grant you some career recognition. Okay, so that's a good thing. All right. For Leo, Venus is in the first house, so the sign will seem to be happy all the time, feel like things are pretty effortless for it. Um, Relationship life still isn't too good. You'll tend to be attracted to people who have issues or people they're like people you've known in the past, maybe older individuals. And so I probably if Leo were to get into a relationship right now, I'd probably wait until after late November when Saturn goes direct. It'll at least give a more straightforward relationship partner. Sun, Mercury, and the second house, very good for financial gains. So the sign will see his financial life improving a great deal. A lot of courage, but changeable desires, changeable interests. But a lot of people will feel very, very, I'm trying to think of a good way to put it, both sexually interested and disinterested at this simultaneously. How's that? Because Mars is in Libra, which increases sexual interest. Ketu's also in Libra, which decreases it. So I think it's kind of an interesting period. So you might find a lot of people attracted to you, but you won't necessarily want to connect with those people. Jupiter's in the ninth house. This is good for overall career luck, especially for those working in places that have to do with travel or working overseas. Saturn aspects this house, so it's not bad. It's a good combination. It creates kind of a Raj Yoga for this chart, which is a special combination for this chart, and it should give good financial gains. Finally, yeah, so we have a lot of planets clustered between Leo and Aries, and not much happening in Taurus through Cancer. All right, Virgo. Virgo has Sun and Mercury in the first house. That's good. It makes this sign much smarter than normal, much more fortunate, better salesman than normal. Um, Mars and K2 and Moon in the second house. Some problems with speech, some problems with overly aggressive speech, some problems with impatience and frustration in achieving goals, especially financial goals. So you'll see money flow in, flow out as soon as it flows in. And Scorpio, third house, is ruled by Mars. So really intense desires to get what you want for this sign. Saturn's in the sixth. That does tend to give some problem with achieving short-term goals, and it can even give some minor health issues. Saturn aspecting Jupiter, uh, I think you'll start to see a lot of hidden energy erupt, especially around the end of the month. Okay, so we have another eclipse coming October 28th, or towards the end of the month, and I'll talk about that next week. But that will be a little bit different in quality from this particular eclipse. So for Virgo, some obstacles, a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, a lot of patience is needed for the sign to get what it wants. But Venus is in the 12th house, so it actually is able to save. It actually is able to save money. For Libra, Libra has Moon and Mars and K2 in the first house. So there's a lot of focus on career life for this sign. Especially what career should I choose? What direction should I go in? What direction will bring me the most gain? But there's a little bit of a hesitancy to act because of the Sun and Mercury in the 12th house. So this sign wants to study the situation a little bit more, but there is a lot of impatience to get on with career matters. Second house Lord is in the first house, so there's a lot of focus on money for the sign. Saturn's aspecting the second house and aspecting the first house from the aspect I use. And so it'll feel kind of tied in or locked into its commitments. It won't be able to make a lot of rapid changes or as much as it likes. Again, Jupiter's in the seventh house. It does open up relationships, but again, I wouldn't engage in any kind of long-term relationship activity or any kind of breaking up a relationship life because Rahu tends to make us do stupid things. So we want things right away, and you didn't hear a snap, but we want to get things right away, and I think that's not going to happen with Rahu, and especially Saturn aspecting Jupiter. Okay, so in terms of partnerships, it does give a little bit of isolation in partnerships. So you maybe want to team up with people not only for relationship life, but also for business matters, and that makes it a little bit difficult. Also, K2 in Libra, I've noticed it tends to make the sign's recommendations go a little bit unnoticed. And it's one of those things that you just have to bear with it. It's almost over. Okay. Venus is in the 11th house, good for gain of money. So that's actually good. Scorpio has Saturn in the fourth house, aspecting the first, as we've said before quite a few times, but the Lord is in the 12th. So there can be a little bit of a proclivity towards wasting money, wasting resources, staying in bed too much. And also, luck will seem a little bit worse than it normally is. Career life actually looks good. Venus and relationship life actually looks good. Venus is in the 10th house. That's a good placement for it. It's in a good sign. In about a week, it'll start to generate some real money. And Sun and Mercury are in the 11th house, which is also really, really good for money. So I think this sign, even though it's spending money, will start to make money pretty quickly. The only problem is there'll be a little bit of impulsiveness in terms of speculation. So if you're in investments or anything like that, wait a while. Don't jump until I would say until early November, mid-November. Um, let's see now. Sagittarius has Saturn in the third house, so it makes this sign. It makes this sign more stable, more determined in its goals. A lot of the frustration in its creative efforts will probably be gone within about uh, a month or so. And also, Venus is in the ninth house, so its luck should be good. Venus is not a good lord for Sagittarius, but Venus in the ninth is a good placement. 10th house, career wise, you're kind of on a roll right now. So there's a lot of attention focused on you, and you'll be able to make a lot of inroads. In terms of financial gains, you'll win some and you'll lose some. Basically, K2 still has you investing kind of blindly in things that you're still not sure whether or not they'll work. And Moon is Lord of the eighth house, so there's all these hidden debts you have to address before you can move forward. And friends will also cause you financial woes. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Saturn in the second house, Jupiter in the fourth, and this combination essentially limits the opportunity for expanding financial endeavors. Now, again, these are indicators. None of the things I'm saying indicates you should just stay still and do nothing. That's kind of ridiculous. Nobody can really afford to do that. But there is some caution, and basically look both ways before you cross the street. Kind of advice being given here. So overall, Capricorn doesn't have, so this is good for money, especially from past efforts, good for promotional opportunities to a certain extent. And you'll see some strange or unusual changes at work over the next few months. So work life will be a little bit disrupted. And finally, Venus sits in the eighth house, so there'll be some unexpected financial windfalls. Sun and Mercury are in the ninth house, very good for promotional efforts, for getting promoted on the job or even for studying spiritual matters. For Aquarius, Aquarius has Saturn in the first, so that's a Sasha Yoga, so it gives this sign a certain amount of authority or leadership capability. Excuse me. And Jupiter is in the third house, so as Saturn aspecting Jupiter, it's going to give us a lot of determination to move forward. Venus is in the seventh. A lot of attractive people coming your way. This is one of the few signs that can probably engage in some kind of romantic involvement without much fear of being hurt. Although I would advise you, the sun is weak, so you'll tend to be attracted to weak or fickle people during this time period. Okay, so just keep that in mind for about 2 months. It's so you'll get a lot of pretty people interested in you, but they won't have a lot of staying power, unfortunately. Um, and let's see now. Ninth house, eighth house has Sun and Mercury, a lot of interest in investigation, maybe even the spiritual sciences. And ninth house has Moon, Mars, and K2 in it. So actually some good luck for career, some boost in career. For Pisces, last but not least, Rahu and Jupiter are in the second house. I think one of the things that we have to look for when Rahu and Jupiter are in the second house is dissatisfaction with money state. Venus is in the sixth house. It gives some problems with water, expenses connected with water, and this is amplified by Moon, Mars, and K2 in the eighth house. So there could be some problems with vehicles needing repair. And Sun and Mercury are in the seventh house. A lot of relationship emphasis is focused on this particular chart. Um, but not in a negative way. Relationship partners will come up with good solutions to problems you're having. Again, a lot of expenses. No sign is free of that this particular week. So that's the signs. Let's go to the astral locality map, or the astral cartography map, as it's also called, as it's more properly called. And I have to take a deep breath because I can hear my voice rasping up. All right, so this is these are where Venus and Saturn are really close to Wake Island. They're not really close to any landmass except uh, far eastern Russia and the Aleutian Islands, and they might impact Hawaii. Hawaii, as we know, is still going through the aftermath of those immense fires, so that's not surprising. We see some Saturn there, um, and but we are seeing a lot of activity, and this is something that I was starting to say yesterday. Uh, the eclipse path was essentially roughly from over here, if I recall correctly, roughly through this, maybe a little bit to the west of the country, and down here. So it impacted the visual eclipse. The actual eclipse you could see was pretty much close to the west coast, close to California, passing through California, Nevada, um, central Texas, and also it hit. Although I didn't draw it really well, it hit um, Mexico, parts of Mexico, and parts of Central America, and it kind of like lumbered over. It'll probably impact South America as well. So that doesn't necessarily mean those will be the only countries affected, but those are the ones that are most directly in the path. And I think one of the things that we can see from this is there'll be changes in government in California. So we already have a change in senator, right? So that Senator Feinstein passed away. Um, and but we'll also see changes in places like Arizona, Mexico, Texas, maybe more because we have Mars, maybe more fighting in this section of the country, North Dakota, South Dakota, down through New Mexico, down through um, Mexico itself. So the border is kind of on the radar. There's a Jupiter line going up through here. So there's a Jupiter line going all the way up through through Minnesota, Michigan, Michigan, and into central Canada. And I think one of the things that this kind of indicates to me is that there's going to be a lot of controversy in Canada over the next few weeks about fairness and justice, just because of where Venus is passing through. Um, and also we have a Saturn line. So this does indicate more restrictive government policies coming out of Canada. There'll be an attempt to have that in the United States, but it won't be as strong as it is in Canada right now. And the other part of South America where I've seen, or of the Americas where I've seen that happen is in Panama and down through Ecuador, Peru, and maybe even influencing Argentina. Um, but I think these lines over here are really indicative of, I won't say domestic strife, but you're going to hear a lot about Colorado, Utah, uh, Montana, Idaho, Washington State, Oregon State, and California over the next few weeks. And it'll be partially due to governmental disruption, especially in this part of the country and up through here, and also over here in this part of the country. So essentially from Ohio down to Florida, including Pennsylvania. Brazil has a Mercury and Sun line going through it, so we'll be hearing a little bit about Brazil. The Azores has a Moon Mars line going through it. And the Azores isn't particularly important to the world at large, but it is important to the Portuguese population. So that's one of the reasons I'm focusing on it. And so there may be some danger of not earthquakes, but but um but land catastrophes like floods and things like that. There's a Jupiter line passing through West Africa over by Morocco and close to England, but nothing is really passing over England and France. But we have a Jupiter line. Between these two lines, we have a Saturn Jupiter line running through Iceland and all the way through roughly Eastern Europe over here, and Italy, and also Libya. So I think you're going to see some more domestic unrest in those countries. And that doesn't mean the domestic unrest is going away in France, but it'll cool down a little bit. And the other big axis up here is over here, which is near Ukraine, but not quite there. So this is north. This is close to Finland. And you have a lot of activity going on through Ukraine and into Iran. Interestingly enough, where there's a war going on right now, there are no planetary lines because those have already been set last week. The event has already occurred. But you will see increased unrest, I think, in Syria, in Iran, and even in Saudi Arabia and down into Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates. It just looks like that part of the world is going to be very, very active all the way over to Pakistan and Afghanistan and touching India just a little bit. So we can see some aggressive action in that part of the world. There's a strong Venus line running right through China, down into Cambodia, Thailand, and touching on Indonesia and Malaysia. And I think one of the things that this usually indicates to me is we have some kind of trade restrictions going on. So the Venus line is strong. There's another line I can't quite see. Give me a second. Yeah, it's a Saturn Venus line, so it indicates trade restrictions. So not necessarily faltering economies, but economies that are experiencing some contraction. Finally, we get over to Japan and Borneo and Australia, and some governmental scandals happening in Australia. Some fights actually in Australia, some violence in Australia. And finally, Jupiter's resting close to New Zealand. It looks like their governmental crises will be over soon. So that's it for me for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you very much, folks. Always a pleasure.